as you know, the Commerce Commission. And listen, this isn't serious stuff. The roles of monopoly cartels and monopolistic corporates in this country has long escaped proper scrutiny and been tolerated. But in a time in which this country needs to make every dollar work for itself, we are living in debt and New Zealanders are struggling just to pay the bills, the justification of the corporate sector for engaging in often predatory behaviour, because the only word could you describe it, should rightly come under much more scrutiny. And finally, the Commerce Commission have done their job. They who seem to have been conspicuously absent over a number of years, I have to say. In fact, I was calling for their abolition a wee while ago because I didn't perceive them as having a role in New Zealand in ensuring true competition and a fairness in the market so that New Zealanders weren't always simply being farmed by the rapacious and all those profits farmed off, as is the case with the Australian banks overseas too. It would seem equally rapacious shareholders who just see New Zealand as a rather easy place to do business. All right, well, joining us to talk about the Commerce Commission report and on steps next is Jon Duffy from Consumer New Zealand, who's been following this issue for a long time. Jon, welcome to the show. Good afternoon to you.
Hey, Michael. It's actually John, not Sean.
It's John.
But,
well,
that's my cousin.
Oh, really? Oh, well, Eric has put you down as Sean, I'm assuming, so he must know your cousin, I'm assuming. Eric
Maybe he does.
Yeah. Okay, John. Sorry, John. My apologies. Listen, John, you've been on Consumer New Zealand has been beating this drum for a while now. Does the Commerce Commission report please you?
Yeah, look, I think the market studies powers that the Commerce Commission have become increasingly useful as they've got better at delivering market studies. So if you think back 3 years, they delivered a market study into the fuel sector and it didn't land particularly well. The recommendations weren't particularly strong, and we haven't seen terribly much change resulting from it other than more monitoring. Fast forward through the supermarket market study and one into building products. This latest one, banking, actually, there's some pretty direct recommendations in there, some really practical steps. And a real, what the market studies do is they kind of stop the debate around whether there is a problem, whether markets are too concentrated, whether, businesses are taking advantage of market power. It puts all that to bed and allows people to then go, all right, there is or there isn't a problem, and in all the market studies they've done, they've found a problem. What are the appropriate solutions? And then the government can step in and take them up from there. You there? Hello?
Sorry, yes, my apologies. I turned off my microphone by mistake. John, there's been a lot of pressure from also the rural banking area or the rural sector of New Zealand as well, who argue that they have been even more extensively farmed than the average consumer in this country, given the interest rates that they're paying and the services they're not receiving.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a political will coming from traditional supporters of the National Party to intervene and do something as well. Can I ask the next question then? We've just had the Taxpayers Union saying, for God's sake, don't look at putting money into Kiwi Bank in the vain hope that it might or might not be a disruptor. Sell Kiwi Bank because they've been completely useless over the last 20 years. Intervene by ensuring there's more competition in the market by, if you like, loosening the regulations to get that competition into the New Zealand sector. Do you have a thought on those issues?
Yeah, I think Kiwi Bank has been underfueled for most of its existence. And if you think back to, the genesis of Kiwi Bank and the arguments that were being run in favour of having a New Zealand-owned bank, it was because we had a sector dominated by big Australian-owned banks that cared more about their profits than about servicing the needs of New Zealand consumers. And that's whether you're rural or urban, whether you're a small business or an individual. The Commerce Commission's report has showed that hasn't changed a hell of a lot, but it has identified the fact that the lack of capitalisation of Kiwi Bank has been a real inhibitor on it competing effectively. So I don't think it's necessarily fair for people to come out and look. You can criticise Kiwi Bank for a lot of things, and I have, but it is, I think, a little bit unfair to criticise them for not muscling up and being as impactful as one of the big, well-capitalised Australian banks when they just don't have those resources at hand. If they had those resources at hand and they were failing to compete effectively, that criticism is legitimate. But until they have a fair suck of the sieve, I think it's difficult to level that criticism at them.
Except if governments were going to, you would think, support Kiwi Bank in its endeavour to be that disruptor, which was the whole aim of 20 years ago, as you point out, then surely you do something as very simple like you just simply bank with them.
Yes, yeah, and lots of Kiwis do, and their market share is
well,
is
but
growing,
the government doesn't.
I
mean, the government.
Oh, I see. Sorry, you mean?
Yeah, I mean central government.
The contract that Westpac currently has.
Yeah.
Well, my understanding is, and you'd need to get this directly from Kiwi Bank, but anecdotally, I understand that Kiwi Bank's systems can't handle the volume of transactions that would come with the government contract, and it's not something that you want to take a risk on if suddenly every teacher and nurse and fireman in New Zealand doesn't get paid properly because the banking systems have fallen over because they haven't been resourced well enough. Then there's a real problem, right?
Yeah, but they've also reduced services. But they've reduced services too, John. So you used to be able to go, I remember originally they were set up, it was quite a neat little operation where you could go to your local post shop and there was the Kiwi Bank operation there too, right? Well, now there's still post shops. There's no Kiwi Bank. They pulled out themselves. That was their decision.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, that's happened across the banking sector. So if you're going, well, what are our competitors doing? Well, they're all reducing their costs by downgrading their level of customer service and moving everybody to digital platforms? Or do we continue with a really expensive face-to-face customer service model? I mean, I think a lot of people would like that, don't get me wrong. I'm not arguing that customers don't prefer that, but if you're already competing with one hand tied behind your back, maintaining a high-cost customer service model in the face of your competitors who aren't doesn't make a lot of sense commercially.
Okay. What is open banking, by the way, which is another suggestion that Consumer New Zealand's come up with as a way of increasing bank competition?
It's a great question because it means different things to different people, and it's quite a nebulous concept, to be honest. At its very simplest, you can think of it in one form as something similar to what happened in the telecommunications industry, where we brought in the ability for number portability. So you can keep your, let's say you're with One New Zealand, you have an 021 mobile phone, you can then go to Spark or 2 Degrees and keep that same number, right? Similarly, if there was bank account portability, you could switch banks but keep all of your details the same and just change the provider. It lowers friction and should encourage switching, which in turn encourages competition. That's one very simple form of open banking. The broader idea is that consumers can use their data to get better, more innovative services from providers, which can cover, it's as wide as your imagination, the services that open banking could cover. Simple examples in other jurisdictions are peer-to-peer payment platforms. So you're out for dinner with a group of people, you decide you're going to split the bill 5 ways, you all hop onto your payment type app and work it out that way, and it's done. You don't need to go to the till and wait around and do separate transactions. You can just do that online. That's one example. Other examples are ways to manage your spending. So if you've got a budget, something you're saving for, you can input that into an app and it'll help you control what your outgoings are to make sure you hit your savings goal or your emissions reduction goal or whatever the case may be.